And so while we don't use the language around mental health support or well-being in the organization, it's really embedded in almost everything that we do. We require a lot from people, and the opportunity here is pretty extraordinary. And people give a lot. And so at the intersection of all of that is that we have to find a way to give people the support that they need to help them grow and develop and to help them find the balance when the opportunity is so big. And we learned anything from COVID, it's that people don't see a separation between work and life anymore. And so we have had to find ways to help them find the kind of ruthless prioritization that they needed in order to be able to work at this pace and, do it in a sustainable way where they could still live a, healthy, meaningful life.
Hello, and welcome to the Mental Health Advantage podcast, where HR, benefits, and total rewards leaders explore the future of workplace well-being. I'm your host, Stephen Sokoler, founder and CEO of Journey, the leading proactive mental health solution for modern companies. We are here to talk about how we are helping support employees and their families with mental and emotional well-being. Today, I'm joined by Amy, and I'm not even going to attempt to say your last name. I'm probably going to say it wrong, but I'll let you do that. Chief People Officer at Databricks, and you have an amazing background. So, Amy, thank you for joining us.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.
All right. Do you want to do a quick introduction, how you ended up here today?
Sure. Yeah. Well, my name's Amy Reicheneder. As you said, I'm the Chief People Officer at Databricks, and I've been here about 6 years through a tremendous amount of growth over that time. We've grown from 500 to over 8,000 employees at this point. And so it's been an incredible experience and lots of change during that time, both within the company and in the environment around us. And I have kind of an unusual background, which is probably what led me to this conversation with you, which is that I was a clinical psychologist prior to going into HR. So I've always had a kind of unique interest in the psychology of happiness and how to get the best out of people in their day-to-day work.
I love that. Well, that seems like a good place to start. So, what first interested you in clinical psychology? How did you end up in that field?
Oh, I was like 12 the first time I said I wanted to be a clinical psychologist. It probably came from I had this like incredible love of people. And so I went all the way through university and graduate school with an eye on being a clinical psychologist, and then got to the end of it and realized that it probably wasn't the right fit for me. So I sort of fell into HR, starting at a very small startup, and realized that I absolutely loved it. I loved the fact that it was people centric, but at the heart of sort of people and business is the people field. And so it was just a perfect fit for my interests and I think skills.
I love that. When I was 12, I wanted to be a baseball player, and I quickly realized I did not have the skills or talent to get that dream faded quickly. But I'm glad you were able to live yours out and then transition smoothly into this.
Thank you.
All right, so Databricks. Actually, why don't you start by just sharing a little bit about the company in case there's folks out there listening that don't know about it?
Yeah, for sure. Databricks is a data and AI platform. So we've been in the AI space long before everyone else was talking about it. And the company is about 12 years old. We are over 3 billion in revenue and probably one of the fastest growing companies in history. So it's been, an incredible experience being here, and part of what's made it so wonderful is that the company is always in a constant state of reinvention and disruption in the technology in the industry, and so that has its own impact on the employee experience and what it requires in order to be able to have the kind of resiliency and fortitude to be successful in this kind of environment.
Well, let's double click on that. Going from, I think you said, what, 500 to 12,000 in 6 years, plus or minus, and you're still standing and smiling. And so, um, with such a rapidly growing team and offices around the world, how do you maintain a culture of well-being and support?
Yeah, it's an interesting question because we have had to be really deliberate about culture through all of this extended hypergrowth. And, maybe I'll share briefly just how we came up with the culture principles here, and then how we think about, bringing those to life through all of this extended growth over years. But, we think about culture really as a set of behavioral norms. And so when we came up with the culture principles for Databricks, it was really through actually the study of people who had been really successful here. And we looked at those set of behaviors and correlated that with times when we had done our most important work, whether it was for customers or innovation in the product. And so people often ask me, like, well, what's the secret to success, working for a company like Databricks? And I always point back to the culture principles, which is that is the behavior of people who are really successful here. And it's everything from being customer obsessed to having a bias for action to thinking from first principles in their work. And but we've tried to lay it out so that it's really easy to understand, and then come up with sets of mechanisms to help bring those to life and make sure that they're continually reinforced and easy to understand and live that in the environment that we work in.
I love that. And how long did that take to come up with? Because I'm sure there's some really thoughtful people leaders out there who are listening and curious about that. How long did it take, and how has it evolved since you started it?
Yeah, it's, we have 5 active founders actually, so a lot of it came from them. And interestingly, they were academics from University of California, Berkeley, and then took this crazy leap of faith to start a company. So some of it actually came from their academic orientation, things like being truth seeking and thinking from first principles. But it was really coming out of COVID that we felt like we needed to have the conversation again about where we were as a company. And we had never slowed down growth, and we had hired thousands of people during COVID. And as we started to think about bringing people back together into the office, it felt like the natural time. And that's when we went into that kind of deep study about the behavior of people who'd been successful here to try to understand what we needed for the next phase of growth. And I do think that culture, like, you want sort of core principles, but over time it may evolve. And so we've always tried to have that lens of, like, when you come back to culture being behavioral norms, that they may need to change and evolve over time. And so we've always had that lens of wanting to make sure that we're thinking about it on an ongoing basis to make sure it's still relevant and serving the purpose that it should here.
I love that. I mean, we think about that a lot here at Journey, obviously at a much smaller.
Mm,
But when it's smaller, there's obviously a lot of risk with any one person you bring in, right? Because the culture fit is so important. So we make sure that when we're hiring, we're really spending a lot of time on the values part, because there are a lot of people who can do the job, right? But
yes.
they really thrive in our environment. Can they add to it? Is very important. And so you mentioned one thing that's pretty unique, which is 5 active founders. So what role does leadership play in the culture there and setting the tone for mental health?
It's interesting. I think about culture kind of on a continuum of being very results focused to being very people focused, and all companies are somewhere in the middle, but almost no one is exactly in the middle on that spectrum. And so I would say Databricks is probably more oriented towards the results focused side of things. And so a lot of what we think about is around the type of culture that we're building, how we empower and enable managers, the kind of support we're giving employees to be able to thrive in an environment that's changing a lot, and how we build resiliency. And so while we don't use the language around mental health support or well-being in the organization, it's really embedded in almost everything that we do, because it does, we require a lot from people, and the opportunity here is pretty extraordinary. And people give a lot. And so at the intersection of all of that is that we have to find a way to give people the support that they need to help them grow and develop, and to help them find the balance when the opportunity is so big. And if we learned anything from COVID, it's that people don't see a separation between work and life anymore. And so we have had to find ways to help them find the kind of ruthless prioritization that they needed in order to be able to work at this pace, and do it in a sustainable way where they could still live a healthy, meaningful life.
Yeah, and how do you do that? What's the secret sauce currently? I'm sure it's a you're always tinkering with it, but after 6 years, I'm sure you've probably figured out a lot of things that work in terms of whether it's benefits or systems to keep employees mentally and emotionally well.
I'd say it's a combination. I mean, I think you can't have one or the other, because in isolation, they won't be sufficient. And so we've certainly invested a lot in everything to provide global benefits for employees, all the way through to having like an extremely generous fitness benefit, so that employees can find the kind of outlets that they need in order to lead a healthy life. And then there's also the mechanisms that we built internally, which is around the kind of transparency and authenticity that we live with in our culture, all the way through to career development, manager development for employees to have their managers be able to help them thrive in their role and be able to balance work and life as well. So I think it's all very interconnected for us in terms of how we think about the elements that lead employees to being able to be really, really successful in work and in life too.
Yeah, I agree completely. I mean, one of the things that we talk to people leaders about all the time is like the benefits are just the start. Like you have to have a culture that supports mental health. Otherwise, you're
Sure.
throwing a bunch of stuff out there that's not, it has no connective tissue to anything.
Exactly.
Thanks for listening to the first half of the episode. I hope you're walking away with some valuable insights. I want to take a quick pause to tell you about my book, The Mental Health Advantage. If you found this conversation useful, you'll find 300 more pages packed with strategies, insights, and real world applications. Grab your copy on Amazon. Just check the show notes for the link. And if you're looking for a more comprehensive mental health solution for your company, let's chat. You'll find another link in the show notes to reach out and explore how Journey can help you. Now back to the show. We talked about founders a little bit, but let's talk about leadership more broadly, because of course leadership can come from any stage of the organization. But let's talk about managers, right? So, how are managers involved in the mental health of their employees, or what does that look like at Databricks from a mental health standpoint?
Yeah, I think all managers in general through COVID have ended up in a very interesting and important role. And, we've seen that employees really, really rely on their managers for so many things. And I found myself in my own role whenever things were happening, starting in COVID and all the way through, all kinds of crises that have happened around us. Over the last couple of years, saying the same words, which was like, oh, please talk to your manager, as if they had some specialized training to help them be able to provide support for employees. And so we realized that we did need to provide more support for the managers as well. And it was things that we implemented like coaching or being able to provide kind of best practices for them to enable them and empower them to be able to play this really important role, because it's not just about work anymore. You know, I think employees come to them with all kinds of things that are going on in their lives. And of course, they want to help and guidance in how they do their best work, but they also need help and guidance sometimes in how they balance whatever's going on in their personal life with work as well. And so the managers play such a critical role, and they've taken on a lot, I think, particularly over the last couple of years.
For sure. Yeah. I remember when I was first a manager at my previous company, the things that employees were coming to me with were very different than the things people come to me with now. And that's probably a very good thing that employees are more open and there's less stigma. But it also means that managers need to be that much more prepared to be able to deal with all types of things that just weren't talked about before.
Yeah, it's so true.
Have you ever done mental health first aid or anything like that?
No.
Okay, so mental health first aid is this program. It's existed forever. Lululemon had done it in the UK, the US, and Canada, where they're based. And then because they're Lululemon, right, they're drinking the Kool-Aid on mental health. They said, we want to roll this out to all 20,000 of our employees. They came to us as a longtime partner and said, we like mental health first aid, but we need something that's more modern, diverse, inclusive. And we built this program that we've now taught in Mandarin in China, in Spanish in Mexico, that basically teaches, we started with managers, and now we're rolling it out to everybody. How do you take care of yourself, right? Because oftentimes managers are not even doing that part, right? So put your oxygen mask on first, what to look for, right? How to approach skillfully and compassionately, and then how do you direct people to the right resources? Because as a trained clinical psychologist or a psychiatrist, you can appreciate the fact that you're not going to train your managers to do that kind of work, nor do you want them to do that work. But you do want them aware, at least enough, so that they can get people to the right care. And so that's a program that I was quite proud when we built that out, and then we've rolled it out to Pfizer and Regeneron and a bunch of other.
I love that.
Yeah. All right. So I've heard you talk about the importance of keeping people at a company. In other words, that turnover is expensive, right? And that culture needs to be built intentionally. So can you speak to how proactive mental health strategies tie into retention?
Yeah, I mean, we look at lots of measures to understand how employees are doing. And, of course, we're a data company, so we have lots and lots of different indicators for how we try to assess where employees are and what they need. And, what we found is that employees at all different phases of life, there's common elements to what they experience working at a company like Databricks. And then there's things that are unique to where they are in their own lives. And so we've had to think very holistically about both the services that we provide for employees to try to meet them where they are and to meet their unique needs. And we've tried to build mechanisms within the culture to make sure that we have the kind of psychological safety for employees to be able to bring up issues when they have them. And, one of the things that's really important at Databricks is around transparency, authenticity, and those are really embedded in who we are and how leadership operates and how the entire culture operates. And so that helps us create an environment where, again, like we don't really use the language of talking about mental well being, but it's kind of embedded in who we are and what we do. And I think that that's often the most effective way for people leaders to think about their own strategies. You have to think about it contextually within what's going to work within your organization. And here, because we're more results focused, as I mentioned on that continuum, like these have been things that we've had to just figure out how we work into the environment in a way that really resonates here, where you can drive those kind of results and have an environment where employees feel well taken care of and that they feel like that they can show up at work with whatever's going on in their life and get the support that they need and be set up and empowered to do great work here.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So, as a data company, um, how do you think about ROI? Is that something that you look at and measure when it comes to mental health, or do you think of it differently?
It's not, it hasn't been a big focus for us. I mean, I sort of look at it as like necessary and sufficient, to be honest, that there are certain benefits that you need to provide for employees, and that there's other important things that we look at around, the experience of our employees, whether that's, attrition statistics or engagement statistics, or even the language that employees are using here. When we do our annual or pulse surveys, that I can see in the language that people use there a lot of their experience here outside of just the quantitative data. And it's things like, I feel like the company really cares about me. You can see it in what people say about their experience that helps me understand that this, whether or not the system that we're building is actually working and supporting people. So I don't look at it as like direct ROI to particular programs, but it's more around all the measures that we look at around employee experience. And you said it perfectly, like it's expensive when people leave and it's expensive to hire people. So you want to make sure that you're creating the right kind of culture and an experience for employees so that they can do great work and that, they're going to have a great experience and they'll contribute in a meaningful and impactful way.
Great. Looking ahead, what's on the horizon for you and the organization as it pertains to this category of things, as it pertains to benefits or culture or mental health? Anything that you're particularly excited about? Obviously, AI is embedded in your DNA much more so than any other company. But anything that you're looking towards and particularly excited about right now?
I mean, one of the things that we're rolling out this year is actually an AI coaching tool for managers. And I do think, we talked earlier about the unique role of the manager right now. And I'm really excited about this transformation and being able to provide this kind of support and technology for managers, because what we're finding as we're piloting it is that people are actually much more comfortable talking to an AI bot than they are a person when it comes to either personal issues or getting support for difficult conversations, that they're actually loving the tech. And I think that this is such an exciting frontier that we're on, and there should be lots and lots of really interesting and supportive ways that AI will impact the employee experience and in helping people grow and develop in their roles.
Yeah, I agree completely. I know for my use, I'll often pop on to ChatGPT or Gemini and just like either I'm asking a question about a particular issue, or more so, I'm helping it rephrase something that I'm trying.
Mm,
I know either I'm triggered or I'm not articulating it well, or there's something where the intention of what I'm trying to say is not going to come across because of the words I'm using, and I
yes.
could use help. And I think so much of communication, I mean, all of it, right? It's not what goes out; it's what gets in. And I feel like if we're able to leverage smart, compassionate, thoughtful technology to make human interaction just smoother and easier, to kind of get rid of some of those rough edges that just take place,
Yes.
I think that can make a huge difference from a managerial standpoint, supporting employees, from people feeling seen and heard. So I'm excited about some of the things we're building and that as well.
That's terrific.
Let me go all the way back. I know we're way off script here, but I just have to ask, what's your background in between the clinical psychologist and the coming and joining a 500-person company that scaled to 12,000 that allowed you to keep up with such rapid growth? I mean, that's, to your point, like, it's one of the fastest growing companies of all time.
Yeah.
It's not for the faint of heart, right? To be in your position. What was
Exactly.
experiences, and I don't mean like what's on LinkedIn, although I'm happy to talk about that, but what
Yeah.
are the experiences that shaped you that allowed you to do that and still be thriving?
Yeah. Well, we're just over 8,000 employees, so we're not quite at 12 yet, but it's on the horizon. But I think that the biggest thing for me, and it's probably part of why I am so interested in this work, is that it's really about sort of being comfortable with ambiguity and also resiliency. And that when people have asked me the question of like, what's allowed you to stay at a company like Databricks through all these phases of growth for 6 years, it's really comes down to those two things. Is that I had always come into companies in the past where I was either the first or second person on the people team and built it from the ground up. So I loved that building process, and with that always is change. And so coming into a company like Databricks, it was basically like that on steroids. Like the people function didn't really exist when I started. And then the company was growing over 100%. And so I think it's been those two personal characteristics that have helped me. And I've had to reinvent myself many, many times over the last 6 years. But it's been extraordinary. I mean, I often tell people I've learned more in the last 6 years than I probably had in the last 20 before that. But part of that is being open to that learning and just realizing that coming in thinking you have all the answers isn't really going to serve you. It's really just about always having that kind of learning mindset and creative mindset to try to build and deliver what the company needs at the point that it's in.
I love that. That's incredible. Last question. Any advice for people leaders who are looking to transform their company from a reactive sort of, not really taking care of mental health as a priority to a more proactive, this is embedded into, our core way of doing business? Any advice for those people leaders out there?
I think there's a couple of things that are really important about that. One is that, you use the word embed, and that's exactly how I think about it too, is that, and isn't really, it's hard to find a company that doesn't have talent and culture as a priority. And so it's really about thinking within that talent strategy about how this fits in. And it may not be that the leadership of your organization is open to talking about a wellness program or mental health support for employees, but it's still important, and that they recognize how important the talent is. And so you have to find a way in your own role to be able to embed it in what you're doing in a way that kind of fits within the culture and strategy of your own company. And that's really where the fun is that it's the creativity of how to do that and speak the language of your leadership while still doing what employees need, which is that they do need that support. And so it's up to us and incumbent on us to find a way to provide that in a way that's relevant and contextualized within your particular organization.
Fantastic. All right. This is wonderful. I appreciate you making time. I know you're super busy, never a dull moment over there, but sharing your thoughts and perspectives I know is valuable for me, and I'm sure will be really valuable for our listeners. The way you're embedding mental health into Databricks is really, really impressive to keep up with that growth from 500 to 8,000, not 12. It's inspiring. So thank you for doing that work. Thank you for sharing your insights. It is very much appreciated.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, Amy, have a wonderful day. Thanks for spending this time with us. We know you're busy. If you enjoyed today's conversation, be sure to subscribe to the Mental Health Advantage and leave a review. Thanks so much and have a beautiful day.